Welcome. You've chosen to spend some time tonight, not in your own world, but in another, an older, slower, harsher world. Close your eyes, let your body relax, and allow your imagination to drift backward many centuries into the heart of the Middle Ages. The medieval city was, in many ways, a marvel of its time, a place of commerce, of faith, of bustling trade and human ingenuity. But it was also crowded, dim, and difficult. To live there, to survive even a single day, required endurance we might struggle to imagine. Tonight, I will guide you through this world. First, you'll walk the cobbled lanes of a medieval town, breathing its air and feeling its pace of life. Then we'll pause to listen to the story of one man who rose from the common people to lead a rebellion, Wat Tyler, and his fate. From there, we'll step into the shadows of mystery, following the whispered traces of the Black Death, a terror whose origins are still not fully understood. And finally, we'll climb beyond the crowded streets into the cool halls of a castle, where the elite of the Middle Ages lived, lives very different from those in the markets below. Settle in. Let the rhythm of the past become a gentle lullaby. This is not a tale to quicken your pulse, but one to slow your breathing, to ease you into sleep. So let us begin. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a medieval town. Perhaps it is the 14th century. The walls rise ahead of you, tall and grey, their stones weathered by centuries of rain and sun. A gate, wooden and iron-bound, stands open. You step forward, and the life of the city begins to surround you. The streets are narrow, much narrower than modern ones. They twist and wind, hemmed in by tall, timber-framed houses whose upper stories lean forward as though whispering to one another across the lane. Above you, laundry hangs on ropes between windows. Below, the cobbles are uneven. Mud gathers in dips, mixing with straw, ashes, and the scraps of food discarded by households. The air is heavy, not foul, but rich, thick with many scents at once. The smoke of countless hearths drifts lazily above. The pungent aroma of animals, chickens in baskets, pigs rooting in the street, mingles with the sharper tang of tanneries working hides in nearby alleys. From a bakery, the comforting warmth of fresh bread offers brief contrast, a note of comfort amid the harsher smells. You walk on, and you notice how close everything feels. The city is alive with sound, the steady thud of a blacksmith's hammer, the cry of vendors offering onions, fish, and cloth, the gossip of neighbors leaning from windows. Children dart through the street, their laughter ringing out, while a cart creaks slowly past, pulled by a tired horse. It is busy, bustling, alive, but it is also difficult. To live here is to endure constant challenge. Food, for example, is not always abundant. Bread is the staple, coarse and dense. A working family may stretch their loaves with peas or beans or whatever grain they could afford. On lean days, there might be little more than broth flavored with a bone, or porridge thickened with what scraps remained. Fresh meat is rare for most, reserved for feast days. Fish, dried or salted, is more common. Hunger is not unusual, and famine, when harvests fail, can transform the rhythm of daily life into desperate survival. And what of water? The wells within the city are used by many, and the streams flowing nearby may also serve as drains for waste. The water is often cloudy, carrying with it unseen dangers. A beer or ale, weak in strength but safer to drink, becomes the daily beverage for both children and adults. Its taste is mild, its alcohol low, but it is a small protection against the sicknesses that so often lurk in water. Your house, if you lived here, would be small. 1 or 2 rooms perhaps shared with family. The walls are wattle and daub, the roof thatch or tile. A single hearth smokes in the center, its warmth both a comfort and a hazard, for fire is never far from spreading in such cramped quarters. Light comes from narrow windows, often shuttered, sometimes covered in oiled cloth rather than glass. At night, the dark inside is near total, pierced only by the flicker of a rushlight or a tallow candle. Clothing is simple. Wool dyed in muted shades of brown, grey or green. Linen, if you're fortunate, for a shift or undergarment. Shoes, if you can afford them, are leather, stiff, and often worn thin. The weather dictates much of your day. The chill of winter seeps easily into stone and timber, while the summer sun can make the air close and stifling. Illness is common. A cough might linger for weeks. Fevers rise and fall without explanation. Small infections, untreated, can grow worse quickly. The city physician, if one exists, offers remedies drawn from herbs and humours, but most people turn to local healers, to charms, to prayers whispered before saints' shrines. And yet, amid these struggles, there is rhythm. The toll of the church bell marks the hours. Dawn brings market stalls to life, noon draws workers to pause for their meal, dusk fills the taverns with quiet conversation. Holy days and festivals break the monotony with processions, music, and communal feasts. The hardships of daily life are softened, at least for a time, by the bonds of community. Still, to you, a visitor from another age, the adjustment would be overwhelming. The closeness of the streets, the uncertain food, the unsteady health, the constant noise, the mingling of odors, each would wear on you. Your body, accustomed to clean water and abundant variety, would struggle. Your senses, accustomed to quiet evenings, might find the city restless. This was life in a medieval city. Never easy, often difficult, yet sustained by resilience, faith, and the simple endurance of ordinary people. Day after day, they rose to face the same streets, the same tasks, the same unending rhythm. And as you walk out of those narrow lanes in your mind, stepping gently away from the noise and crowd, we will shift our attention from the ordinary people of the medieval city to one extraordinary man who rose among them. His name was Wat Tyler, and his story belongs to rebellion. As you leave behind the crowded markets of the medieval city, imagine now the fields stretching beyond the walls. Wide, open spaces of tilled earth, dotted with thatched cottages and the smoke of hearths rising into the evening air. Here, in the countryside, life was tied to the soil and to the will of landlords. For centuries, peasants had endured a system known as serfdom, bound to the land, obligated to give labor and dues to those above them. Life was ordered and predictable, though often harsh. But the 14th century brought disruption, and with disruption, discontent. It is within this climate that we meet a man named Wat Tyler. His early life is little known. He was an ordinary craftsman, perhaps a roof tiler, as his name suggests, living in the county of Kent in England. What made him different was not his station, but the moment in history in which he lived. The Black Death, which we will explore later, had swept through Europe only a generation before. Whole villages were emptied, the labor force diminished, and those who survived found themselves in a strange position. They were more valuable now, for their hands were needed. Wages could rise, mobility increased, and peasants began to feel the stirrings of possibility. But the ruling classes were reluctant to accept such change. Laws were written to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. Restrictions were tightened, and taxes were levied heavily to fund ongoing wars. By 1381, the burden had become too heavy, and the spark of revolt was struck. The immediate cause was a poll tax, a fixed tax on every adult, regardless of income. For the poor, it was unbearable. When royal officers attempted to enforce its collection in the villages of Kent and Essex, resistance spread. People refused to pay. Crowds gathered. Voices rose. And among them, Wat Tyler emerged as a leader. His manner, we are told, was commanding. He spoke clearly, directly, appealing to the sense of injustice felt by common folk. Under his guidance, the rebellion grew not into scattered unrest, but into an organized movement. Thousands of men and women began to march, converging on London. Imagine the scene, roads filled with peasants carrying makeshift weapons, banners fluttering, voices chanting as they walked. Their destination was the capital, the very seat of royal authority. Their demand was not simply relief from attacks, but freedom from the bonds of serfdom itself. When they reached London, the city gates opened, whether out of sympathy or fear, and the rebels poured in. For several days they held the city. Records tell of attacks on symbols of wealth and power, the burning of official buildings, the destruction of legal documents that bound peasants to their lords. For a moment, it seemed as if the old order might truly be overturned, and at the center of it all was Wat Tyler. Calm, resolute, he stood as the voice of the people. Accounts describe him leading negotiations with the young king, Richard II, who was only 14 years old at the time. The demands were bold: the abolition of serfdom, fair rents, and an end to the harsh feudal dues. For a moment, Richard seemed to agree. He met with Tyler at a place called Smithfield. It was June, warm, the air alive with tension. The king addressed the crowd, promising reforms. Hope rose like a tide. But then, in an instant, the course of events shifted. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some say Tyler acted with too much familiarity toward the king. Others claim he insulted royal officers, or that a scuffle broke out. Whatever the cause, the Lord Mayor of London stepped forward, drew his weapon, and struck at Tyler. The blow was sudden, and the leader of the peasants fell. The sight shocked the crowd. For a moment they surged, ready to avenge him, but the young king, displaying a calm beyond his years, rode forward. He called out to the rebels, urging them to follow him, promising once again that their grievances would be addressed. Distraught and uncertain, they obeyed. The moment of fury dissolved into confusion. Without their leader, the rebellion quickly unraveled. Promises made to the rebels were soon broken. Many were punished, executions carried out, and the harsh structures of feudal control reasserted themselves. Yet something had changed. The revolt was crushed, but the memory of it lingered. Serfdom, though not ended in that moment, began its long decline. Wat Tyler himself became a symbol. To some, he was a dangerous rebel, a man who challenged rightful authority. To others, he was a champion of justice, a voice for the voiceless. His life, brief as a leader, revealed the cracks in the medieval order. His death, sudden and violent, underscored the fragility of rebellion in the face of power. As you picture the field of Smithfield fading into the distance, with the echoes of that meeting dissolving into quiet, you may feel the weight of history as both inevitable and fragile. A man rose, a crowd gathered, a moment of possibility appeared, and then it was gone. But history is not only rebellion and rulers, it is also mystery. And so, from the story of Wat Tyler, we will turn to another shadow over the medieval world. A force more invisible than armies, more powerful than kings, the plague that haunted every alley, every village, and every city street, the Black Death. Imagine once again the narrow streets of a medieval city. The sounds of vendors and the tolling of church bells fade, and in their place comes an uneasy stillness. It is the 14th century, and whispers of something terrible drift from town to town. The Black Death. That is what later centuries would call it, though at the time it had many names: the pestilence, the great mortality, God's punishment. Whatever words were used, the effect was the same: fear and an ever-present sense of fragility. Where did it come from? Even today, historians and scientists continue to piece together its origins. Most agree that it began far from Europe, perhaps in the grasslands of Central Asia. There, among wild rodents and their fleas, the bacterium known today as Yersinia pestis is thought to have lived quietly for centuries. With the expansion of trade routes, the Silk Road stretching like a thread between East and West, the infection may have begun to travel, carried slowly but steadily across continents. By the time it reached Europe in 1347, it moved with terrifying speed. Ships arriving at Mediterranean ports brought not only goods, but also sickness. From Sicily to Genoa to Marseille, it spread outward, as if carried on the very air. Within a handful of years, it reached nearly every corner of the continent. The symptoms, as described by medieval chroniclers, were unmistakable. Swellings or buboes appeared under the arms or in the groin. Fevers burned, strength failed, and often within days life was gone. Entire households were emptied, entire villages silenced. But what is striking is not only the mortality, but the mystery. People in the Middle Ages had no clear understanding of bacteria or fleas, or even how disease might spread. They sought explanations in the world they knew, in the alignment of the stars, in foul mists rising from the earth, in the sins of humankind. Physicians prescribed treatments of herbs, bloodletting, or the burning of aromatic woods. Priests called for prayers, for processions, for penance. Flagellants, groups of men who whipped themselves in public, wandered from town to town, believing their suffering might atone for the sins of the world and drive the plague away. None of it worked. And so the plague became not just a disease, but a shadow in the imagination of an entire age. Archaeology offers us glimpses into its toll. In London, mass graves have been uncovered, carefully arranged, yet hastily filled. In other cities, remains reveal the suddenness of the catastrophe. Men, women, and children buried together, their lives ended in a span too quick for ceremony, and still the origins carry mystery. Why did it spread so quickly? Why were some regions devastated while others less so? Why did some individuals survive while their neighbors perished? Modern science answers part of the puzzle. Fleas on rats carried the bacteria, transmitted through bites and later through human-to-human contact by air. But not all is fully understood, even now. For those who lived through it, the explanations were more spiritual than scientific. Some believed the plague was a test from God. Others saw it as the work of evil forces. In certain places, suspicion turned against marginalized groups, leading to persecution and violence. Fear, in its way, spread as swiftly as the sickness itself. And yet, despite its devastation, life continued. Cities did not vanish. Villages did not all disappear. Survivors rebuilt. Fields were tilled again. Markets reopened. The rhythm of daily life returned, even as the memory of the great mortality lingered in every household, every parish, every whispered story told by firelight. The Black Death changed Europe profoundly. Labor shortages weakened the feudal system. Families, once bound by tradition, began to imagine new possibilities. Art and religion absorbed the themes of mortality, of fragility, of time itself slipping like sand through open hands. The world after the plague was not the same as the world before. As you let these images drift through your mind, the crowded ships docking in Sicilian harbors, the silent streets of stricken towns, the soft toll of a church bell over a burial ground, notice how history, even in its most frightening chapters, becomes quiet when viewed from a distance. The fear that once consumed lives has become for us only memory. And from that memory, we turn one last time to contrast. For not all in the Middle Ages lived with the same hardships. Beyond the narrow lanes and the cramped houses, there were castles, stone fortresses rising on hillsides, their walls thick, their halls wide. Here a different rhythm of life unfolded, and it is into that rhythm that we will now step. Imagine yourself walking away from the crowded medieval streets. The noise of vendors, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, and the hum of ordinary life fade behind you. Ahead, rising from a hill, is a castle. Its grey walls loom against the sky, high and imposing. At its base, a wide moat reflects the sunlight, while the drawbridge stretches across like an open hand. You step forward, and the air feels different here, still carrying the sense of smoke and earth, but quieter, more controlled. Inside, life unfolds at a slower pace. a rhythm very different from that of the town below. Castles were both fortresses and homes. They were designed to keep enemies at bay, but also to provide comfort to those who lived within. Passing through the heavy gatehouse, you find yourself in the outer courtyard, where servants hurry about their work. Horses are being brushed, chickens peck the ground, and smiths tend to armor and tools. Yet beyond this bustle lies a more private world. Inside the great hall, space opens wide before you. High timbered ceilings rise above, echoing with every sound. Long wooden tables stretch down the length of the room, ready for feasts or gatherings. At the far end, upon a raised dais, sits the Lord's table, more finely adorned with silver goblets and richly embroidered cloths. The air carries the scent of roasted meats, herbs, and the wax of many candles. Meals in such halls could be elaborate affairs. Picture the scene. Musicians at one side playing lutes or flutes, while servants move between the tables with trays of bread, cheese, venison, and spiced dishes. Ale and wine flow freely, poured into cups for guests and household alike. Conversation hums steadily, punctuated by laughter or the clink of metal. For a peasant, such abundance might seem unimaginable, but for the noble household, it was part of the expected rhythm of life. Beyond the hall, smaller chambers reveal further layers of comfort. The lord and lady might have private rooms, with carved wooden furniture, colorful tapestries, and heavy feather beds covered in furs. These chambers were warmer, quieter, and more insulated from the world outside. Light filtered through narrow windows, often covered in glass if the household was wealthy, casting patterns across stone floors. Daily life in the castle was ordered, but not idle. Lords managed estates overseeing rents, harvests, and disputes. Ladies of the castle often directed the household staff, managed accounts, and ensured that guests were received with hospitality. Children were taught letters, manners, and the expectations of their station. Pages and squires trained in the arts of knighthood, practicing with wooden swords in the courtyards. And then there were the rituals. The chapel within the castle echoed each morning with the voices of priests and choristers. Prayer marked the hours, much as it did for the peasants, though here the setting was enriched with carvings, painted walls, and altars adorned with relics. Faith was woven into the stone of the castle as firmly as it was into the thatched cottages beyond the walls. Leisure too found its place, hunting in the surrounding forests, hawking with trained birds, and playing games of chess or dice filled the hours of the noble household. Minstrels entertained with songs of romance and tales of chivalry. Dancers moved gracefully to the music of fiddles. For those within these walls, life could feel more secure, more privileged, and more abundant than for the majority outside. Yet even here, hardship was never far away. Castles could be besieged, their supplies cut off, their stones battered by enemy machines. Illness did not spare the noble any more than the peasant, though the treatments may have been more readily available. And beneath the comfort lay the knowledge that all of this depended on the labor of those who worked the land, who tilled the fields and carried the burdens. Still, to walk the halls of a medieval castle is to glimpse a world apart. Cool stone underfoot, flickering torchlight along the walls, the low murmur of voices blending with the occasional call of a distant horn. Life here had its own rhythm, measured, ceremonial, layered with both privilege and responsibility. And now, as you allow these images to settle in your mind, the stone towers, the echoing halls, the warmth of the hearth, let us draw the journey to its close. From the crowded lanes of the city, to the rise and fall of rebellion, to the mystery of the plague, and finally to the stillness of the castle, we have traced the contours of medieval life. Closing reflection. History often feels distant, like shadows on the wall of a long-forgotten chamber. Yet when you linger with it, you begin to sense the humanity within it, the daily rhythms, the fears, the hopes, the endurance. You would not last a day in a medieval city. Its struggles, its discomforts, its demands would overwhelm. And yet, Millions of people did live there. They endured the noise, the hunger, the uncertainty. They celebrated, prayed, and carried on. Their world was not ours, but in its rhythms, we can hear the echo of our own persistence. As you rest now, let those echoes soften into silence. The streets grow quiet. The castle halls dim. The past becomes only a gentle murmur, like a lullaby of time itself. Good night.